Okay, got it. Can
You can go ahead. Yes.
okay? Can everybody hear me properly and see the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So at any moment of time, the rules remain the same. At any moment of time, you see the screen not moving or my voice going. Either put it in the chat mode because the internet sometimes behaves erratically. And good to meet you all once again. So we are talking about feminization of migration. In fact, all of you, I wanted to start with something very interesting in a different context. All of you, or most of you, or quite a few of you might have seen that viral video which came out of Manipur. Did you people see the viral video?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm not wanting to talk about the video, about the context of the video, etc. What I wanted to talk about was the fact that over the last many sessions, we've been talking about identity. We've been talking about belonging. So now look at the fact there are these two groups of people who are Indians who belong to different communities. They are in the same geographical area. They speak the same language, yet they are at arms with each other. I mean, they are fighting with each other. There is this identity which works, what we talked about identity, and now you can see the concept of identity in real time. Yes, Ranjit, perfect. I think Dr. Sada, accepted this, and I think this will come out. So there is an identity, and then on top of that, there is an identity politics being played out. Now think about the fact also in this identity politics, the victims are women. And when we started talking in the last unit about gender and migration, gender plays out in different ways. We, in the last unit, did talk about gender and sex. We talked about how gender, when we looked at gender and we looked at migration, there are many issues in this. And today we take that forward into talking about feminization of migration. And as I was working on this topic, I remembered there was a Bollywood movie starring Kangana Ranaut called Queen. Has anybody seen that movie? Guys, did anybody see that movie called Queen? Hello? Can people hear my voice? Okay, I can see some chats. No, okay. So there is a Bollywood movie called Queen. It was supposed to be a super hit movie. I mean, if you have not seen it, you can definitely stream it somewhere on some app. And it was about this girl who's about to get married, and after marriage, she's supposed to travel to France. And for some reason, the marriage does not happen. And then, okay, so the marriage does not happen, but she wants to get out of that breakup, and she decides to travel alone to Paris. So that was a full movie on feminization of travel, where a single girl is traveling without a male partner to Paris and comes back. Let's extend this into feminization of migration. So what are the objectives? Understand the concept of feminization, learn about vulnerabilities and exploitations experienced by women migrant workers, know about various legal provisions in national and international level that protect migrant workers and promote legal and fair migration. There are some major developments in international migration. Over a period of time, there has been a rising number of women migrants. There has been a rise, or what we say, a growth of women-centric occupation. We have migration of women in an independent capacity. So the example of the movie Queen, where this girl takes a travel in an independent capacity. She is not Mrs. So-and-so. She is not somebody's partner. She is just traveling alone. Then there are, of course, women-related legislations and growth. And there is a very important thing which is happening worldwide is the growth of gendered perspectives on various issues. People, more and more people are now being sensitive and understanding the concept of gender rather than clubbing it as a part of the biological sex. People are able to understand there are nuances and that fine line about various genders. There are more and more people who are able to understand, lawmakers are able to understand, to frame laws. So if you look at this, these are the images of women CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. And if you see, there are women of color. In fact, if you go and trace the background of the white women, there's quite a possibility a whole lot of them might have come from migrant families. In fact, as I said, the story of human history is the story of migrations, of migrants. US as a country is a country of migrants. In fact, all countries are countries of migrants. How you look at it, what proportion, what percentage, it's your point of view. And can you identify any one of them who's an Indian? Can anybody identify an Indian CEO?
Indra Nui PepsiCo.
That's right. That's right. That's here. That's right. In fact, Kamala Harris, the Vice President of America, comes from an Indian descent. So, okay. So let's look at some background. As per global estimation, female migrate comprise about 135 million or 48% in 2020, what we saw in our last presentation. As per ILO report, there are nearly 66.6 million or 44% international migrant workers in 2013. Women are not only migrating, but participating in economic activities on a large scale. A whole lot of things have been happening in the world and are happening in the world, which is leading to this. So the term feminization of migration is associated with the phenomena where women migrate for an economic activity rather than just join male family members as dependents. Women today in the 21st century are not just looked as dependent, but because of increase of literacy, increase of opportunities, increase of travel, and increase of globalization are today, engaging in economic activities and migrating for that. And the occurrence of is the result of many factors. There's an increase in demand for female labors. For example, millions of women in developing or underdeveloped countries are migrating. So here, women are directly associated, or women work is directly associated to their gender, because more often than not, it is normally said that women are caregivers. In fact, in a lot of discussions, when they say women and men are different, men are supposed to be technically strong, and that is why they work outside, and women are technically caregivers and work. That also is a myth in many different ways. And in fact, as more and more gender studies are happening and more sensitization are happening, some of these myths are being debunked because women have picked up a lot of other jobs. For example, and in fact, because the lawmakers are also now understanding, we are looking at women in active roles in, let's say, Army, Navy, Air Force, and other jobs which were traditionally occupied by men. And the change in global economy and impact of neoliberal policies have introduced a series of migration changes. For example, large-scale privatization in global south. There's been a change in social structure. For example, you can see the change in social structure in India itself. A whole lot of large families are breaking up into nuclear families. We have definitely many more women now than there were earlier. In engineering colleges, there are many more women. The proportionate number of women is still way less, because if women are almost 48 to 49% of the society, then typically an engineering college should have about 48% of women, which is not there still. But definitely the proportion of women are increasing. There's an there's an increase of gap between rich and poor because of privatization, because of globalization. Increase in the informal economy has provided a space where a large number of women enter the workforce. uh, a lot of women are now entering the gig economy. The gig economy is your couriers. The other day, I saw this lady near my house on a two-wheeler delivering couriers. Obviously, of some company. Or there are so many gig workers today in India. Often, women from developing countries migrate as workers to support their families, and now it is, as a norm, it is understood that if a woman is educated, is mobile, and is able to support the family, those earlier rigid norms of women will not work, are slowly easing out. So you'll see more and more women coming out to augment the family salary or the family income. Trends in female migration, as claimed by earlier scholars, it's not a simple movement of female as a partner with their husband. That was the traditional thought process. Historically, to a large extent, female migration remained unaccounted for in early migration studies, because in early migration studies, they were not looking at the gender aspect at all. The changing nature of the world economy and demand for female workers has changed the overall migration perspective. So now that's how things have changed in the academic world. Scholars are looking at that. Scholars are looking at how gender migration is changing, how the policies need to change, how the states need to, kind of prepare for women migration or female migration. So, for example, as per 2013 report, World Migration Figures of UNDESA, a proportion of female migrants range between 52% in global north to 43% in global south. And it's not equal, varies as per geographic location, sector, and demand, which is logical. Some factors are more prominent, like care work, hospitality, teaching. For example, the Kerala nurses from Kerala, when you look at the internal migration, we've always seen nurses or hospital care workers coming from Kerala. In fact, recently, when I had gone to a hospital in North India, I came across care workers from Haryana, because the language they were speaking was from Haryana, which was a little kind of unnerving, because you are mostly, you tend to look at, or mostly you see care workers, hospital care workers from Kerala. In general, women from developing countries migrate for care work or as domestic workers. Domestic workers also, because a lot of care and domestic, and why this is more apparent is because a lot of care and domestic work does not require any special skill. in terms of degrees or in terms of special courses. It is assumed that the females are much more apt at care work and domestic work. Again, it is assumed, I use the word. The work of experts on gender studies suggests that women generally get recruited in their profession that demands traditional gender role and that work is undervalued. We typically, when I ask my students, what does your mom and dad do? More often than not is housewife, which is almost kind of devaluing the homework. So there was this new terminology of homemaker which came in. These are terminologies which move with time and change with time. Many jobs in service sectors are, and there is another factor to it. Many jobs in the service sector are unregulated and invisible in nature. Home care and domestic work labor takes place in private house, unregulated, invisible, and hence exploitative for the migrant women. So in a lot of cases, a stereotyping and in fact the pushing of this kind of private work is encouraged because it is invisible, it's unregulated, and it's exploitative. So inevitably, people can be exploited. Okay. So Kangat is talking about in Bihar, we find Rajasthani male healthcare. Kangat, in fact, today, if you see, if you take a snapshot of India itself, a lot of male workers are traditionally entering care work, hospital care work, and other care work, which was typically women centric. There has been a lot of mix and match which is happening, which is a very interesting things in a way. And then subsequently, these people are then migrating from India for better opportunities. So this was, a graphic in terms of 20 top 20 female dominated migrant. So UNDESA has created this migrant corridors. And if you notice, there's a very interesting point out here, a data point. Look at the migration from Philippines to United States. I'm sorry. Look at the large point, 1250 thousands. This is in thousands. And if you see, there is an India-Nepal corridor and a Nepal-India corridor. So more women are moving from India to Nepal and less from Nepal to India. Though, oh, no, it is more. In fact, this is a bigger circle than this. So this was a graphic I picked up. This will be not there in your course material. So inevitably, as I said, in case you can either get these PPTs from Dr. Sada, or if you write to me, I can also share it. Kangat has been regularly writing and I've been sharing the PPTs. You can take it from Kangat also in case you are all in a group or something. So let's look at some of the occupational category of migrating women. The biggest category happens to be domestic work, attracts a large number of women migrant workers from low-income countries. Inevitably, these women are looking to augment their household incomes. They look at the fact these opportunities are not available locally. Also remember the fact with, for example, in India, considerations of castes or other family considerations will not allow a woman to work locally. So they would either look at a different state or they would prefer to go abroad. So as per IOM report, there are an estimated 67 million domestic workers. 67 million of which 80% are women. And remember, this is a report only. Help low skilled and less educated women to get easy access to work, allow them to earn money and contribute to family income. The remittance they send back contribute to the development of the region. And that's why domestic work is the easiest. And because it's unregulated, it's informal, it's invisible, the exploitative nature of this work also comes to light. What we saw again, as I showed those reports of these women from Punjab who were taken to the Gulf countries. And migrant domestic workers, if there are such a large number of domestic workers, they obviously face vulnerabilities, low wages or no wages, long hours of work, sexual exploitation, and trafficking. Research suggests that only very few domestic workers are covered by general labor laws. Subject to discrimination, their restriction on their movement also hampers their opportunities. So this is the nature of the domestic work. It's exploitative, yet it allows for women from developing or underdeveloped countries with very little education or very little skill set to be able to work and augment their family incomes. Now there's a very interesting system. For example, in Gulf, there is a system called kafala system, under which individuals or the companies hold the sponsorship permits to employ foreign labor. What a little similarity is typically the contract system. Today, a large number of entities in India are using the contractual system, where a contract is given to a contractor who then employs people. The government many a times is saved of giving a lot of perks or insurance or this. They save a lot of money. Now it is up to the contractor to be true to its contract in terms of payment, in terms of working conditions. Similarly, in the Gulf, there is this kafala system where individuals or companies, so the government, the state, tells the individuals or gives the authority to the individuals or companies to import workers for their work. Now, these individuals or organizations are the one who hold all the keys. And the critics of the system have compared it to modern slavery. They argue that the system is exploitative because these people who get the passes from the state typically then keep all the travel documents of the worker, the migrant worker. And inevitably, if there's a female worker, she or he is not allowed to move out to get a job without the sponsor saying so. And obviously, by the very nature, it's exploitative. More so for women who may be forced to stay at the sponsor's house and face sexual exploitation, which typically happened for these Punjabi women. Swadesh, its age restriction is 35 years.
Yes, sir. There is a age restriction. Stopping after 35 years, women can move Gulf.
So, which obviously also makes sense then, because that makes it more exploitative.
Yes.
Because typically, if you have to exploit traffic, you are typically talking about age limit. And then the typical reason given it is that young people can work, old people cannot work, old people come with their own logistics, and so on and so forth. So from the Human Rights Watch, I picked up this article, Lebanon's abusive kafala system, sponsorship system, tens of thousands of workers trapped in highly abusive condition. You can go on to Human Rights Watch and pick up this article. If you just give a Google search on kafala system, you'll get to know a lot more. And then I picked up this article from The Guardian, which talked about Qatar, Qatar stopping, and yet again, how the laws are framed, one has to look at then how it works. Sometimes the framing is such that it appears to be that things, are becoming better, but obviously there are, those nuances that one has to see. Workers will be able to switch jobs, but rights groups say measures not far enough. So human right in focus on Qatar, that's an article in Guardian. The absence of an advocate protection mechanism makes these migrant workers more vulnerable. Their isolation hinders access to accurate information. Their invisible nature of work leads to violation of their human rights. So, for example, in this Punjab case, most of the agents which were recruiting these women were women and known to these women. And that's typically how this multi-level marketing functions. Agents work in the same way, uh, and the invisible nature of the work leads to violation of the human and labor rights. They are kept as separate, human rights and labor rights. Then there is this category of service sector. So caregiving services is a service sector. Last time we had seen the case study of Philippines, where the government actively, prepares these caregivers for work abroad. The healthcare workers today comes under professional services. These skills give them confidence and opportunities for new learning. Employment both at national and international level, both in the home-based and hospital-based care workers. Today, with aging population, especially in the West, home-based and hospital-based based care worker is booming. They require a lot of care workers. In fact, in India now, for example, locally, the concept of care work is known. People are looking at care work. There are professional agencies which offer care work services. So it's changing in terms of mindsets locally also. Care workers also face many problems, like domestic workers getting trapped in the hands of fake recruiting agents. Many have to pay extra fees to get opportunities. So inevitably, how do you govern all this? People will keep moving. How do you govern? And then what happens, say, for example, again, I'll take the case of the Punjab women. How do you get consular access to these people? How do you then take action in terms of getting these people back in case they have been swindled, or they are, or they have got into a legal issue? Though care workers are being hired as per the country's norm, they generally get hired through private agencies or informally to work in houses. So how do you regulate this sector becomes a major issue, not just for countries, but international organizations. How do you figure it out? So for example, example of German government, a concerted action on nursing scheme introduced in 2018 by German government, which identifies 5 areas for attracting and retaining nurses. States have to plan this much ahead, so that they are able to handle these migrants and are able to adhere to human rights and labor rights. 5 areas for attracting and retaining nurses: higher pay, recruitment outside of the country, health promotion and digitization, additional training nurses, emphasis a need-driven approach to staffing care facilities. But the very interesting fact on all this requires a lot of data to get generated. So unless we do not know what is the demography, we do not know how the caregiving is happening, we do not know what all segments of people are requiring caregiving, what areas of caregiving are required. Do we have enough, say for example, today in India, we are woefully short on counselors, on psychiatrists, on psychologists. So there, the governments need to make policies do we get local? If we do not get local, how do we hire from outside? Is there a broad spectrum that we hire, or do we hire from specific countries? Shortage of nurses is recognized as a critical policy issue in comparison to the retention of physicians. That's what an example from German government, from Germany, has to identify. And when this comes out in a public domain, then obviously the UN organizations are also able to pick up this data. They know that this particular state is having this policy. And as I said, it's very important to have a policy. Otherwise, ad hocism really spoils the whole system. You are not able to, then you are, basically catching your tail. Because movements will continue to happen, migration will continue to happen. So this was an example from Germany. Okay, this is, I think, a duplicate slide. Okay, hang on. So from the CAP website, I picked up this article, a profile of immigrant women in workforce, and this is the US society working across industries that serve all communities. But disproportionate, we have talked about how COVID-19 had a disproportionate effect on women in workforce, especially the migrant women. And this article talks about an estimated 12.3 million immigrant workers, including 2.5 million undocumented women, are members of the workforce. Mind you, they don't write illegal aliens. They use the word undocumented women are members of the workforce. It's a terminology. Together, they comprise 16.3% of all employed women in the United States. Top 5 industries: healthcare and social assistant, accommodation, food services, typical gender roles, education services, then retail, trade, and manufacturing, which are typically not very gender role. But healthcare, social assistance, accommodation, food service, education are typically gender roles. And this is a 2021 article. It goes on to say that immigrant women's workforce is essential for the livelihood and well-being of their families. So now more and more state countries, as well as organizations, as well as lawmakers, are coming to this conclusion that women's workforce participation is essential for livelihood and well-being of families. So that is a major shift. 1/3 of immigrants' mother are the primary breadwinners of the family, either as single working mothers or as married women. There is this new, sensitization to the fact that there are single working mothers. So, for example, there was this major uproar in school forms where they inevitably asked for father's name. And a lot of single women families had a problem to that, who earn as much or more than their husband. The number jumps to 36.3% for Latina immigrants. Are primary or co-breadwinners, which includes breadwinning mothers and married mothers, bringing home at least 1/4 of their family's earning. And this also changes the social dynamics, because if a woman is the primary bread earner or contributes of half the income in a family, well, then the voice of the women is as much as the guys. So obviously it leads to tensions in society. It leads to a new understanding or a new negotiation which are happening in families and society. And we can see already those tensions, for example, in India, where women are today in the workforce. They are earning money. They are earning almost as good or more than the men. So obviously it leads to various social issues. In the healthcare industry, migrant workers, immigrant workers fill a range of occupation: hospital support staff, nurses, doctors, maintaining food supply chains and keeping the country fed. In fact, during COVID-19, when there were lockdowns throughout the world, it was a lot of these support workers which played a crucial role in keeping cities clean, in getting food supplies, in taking care. An estimated 451,000 immigrant women, including 195,000, are cooks and food preparation workers. In 128,000 immigrant workers are agriculture workers, many of whom continue this work with minimal access to workplace protection. Sorry. So this was, what the article talked about, larger points to the article. So policies to protect women migrant workers. And from the Indian context, the Immigration Act 1982 is to regulate immigration of people from India with the stated goals of reducing fraud or exploitation of Indian workers recruited to work. So there is an Immigration Act. The Act imposes the requirement of obtaining immigration, also called POA clearance, from the Office of Protectorate of Immigrants, Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs for immigrant. And yet we see that the Punjab case happened. I keep talking about the Punjab case because that was the latest case. People going to any one of those 18 listed countries, there is a immigration clearance required under the Immigration Act. So there is something called an ECR passport immigration check required. If the applicant is not 10th pass or does not have a certificate of 10th pass, the applicant has to undergo an immigration check. Children under 15 years of age are ECR passport holders. There is something called a Pravasi Bharatiya Bima Yojana. The scheme was launched in 2003, has been amended in 6, 8, and 17, strengthening the coverage of immigrant workers. So there are some schemes. Then there has to be, one has to look at how, where are these migrant workers are going? Are they going through regular channels? There are a lot of illegal or irregular channels they go through. There are these private agents. Who's regulating that? How does it come about? Where does the information come about? There are many more. In fact, there was this news item about this Gujarat family which froze to death at the US border. So obviously they had migrated using illegal agents and so on and so forth.
Sir, many people are going without recruiting agencies. That's why they're not avail this Pravasi Bharatiya Bima Yojana, 10 lakh death compensation.
Absolutely, absolutely. See, again, the fact is, how do people obtain information is also very important. Where all
the opportunities of migration also very less with the recruiting agencies.
Okay.
That is the thing.
Okay, so that's an additional pieces of information which has come in, because the opportunities is less. Then obviously people use the irregular recruiting agencies. When they use the irregular recruiting agencies, they don't get this bima, and there are so many issues which come into the picture. So there are all these things which come in. So it also then comes, the ownership lies with the government and non-government agencies working in the area of migration or overseas affairs or Ministry of External Affairs to keep putting this information out in the public domain so that more and more people are able to get it, or to see if the regular recruiting agencies are short-staffed or are not sufficient to handle the kind of migration which is happening, how to augment it, whether to change a policy. There are so many things that need to be talked about.
So in these ECR countries, many agents and sub-agents are playing key role to sending these women.
And all these agents are registered with the government, or they are not. They are the non-regular agents.
The non-regular agents.
Would be. We will not be surprised, because with such a huge country and with so many things happening and with such a huge population, there is always this scope for irregular agents and irregular work and irregular schemes to happen. So it becomes a challenge for the government. Okay, policies to protect women migrant workers is done by ILO. ILO guides states through its conventions and recommendations. With regard to domestic workers, there is something called a Work Convention 189, which came into force in 2013. So what is Work Convention 189? I picked up some aspects to it. This is, so you can go on the ILO website. There are all these conventions. It preamble says recognizing the significant contribution of domestic workers to global economy, which includes increasing paid job opportunities for women and men workers with family, great scope for caring children and substantial income consider. So they have a preamble. They have the protocols. What is it? So 189 assures the domestic workers of their entitlement to fundamental rights available to other workers in countries. Includes a weekly day off, limits to hours of work, minimum wages. Whether it's implemented or implementable is a different thing. It provides provisions for social security to domestic workers and overtime wages. Convention emphasizes enter Kosovo. Okay, Kangat has said Indians from Punjab enter Kosovo with only passport and illegally migrate. Would definitely. Would definitely. Remember one thing, everybody who tends to migrate legally or illegally is trying to look at a better opportunity. Those trying that better opportunity might be a perceived better opportunity. It might actually not be a better opportunity. So, for example, the Gujarat family, which froze on the US-Canada border, for them it was a perceived good opportunity. It led to their death. So, it again how these systems work, how the information travels. A lot of times these are perceived. So inevitably people migrate because of better opportunities. They are looking at a better opportunity than what they currently have. The convention emphasizes on providing precise information of contract to the workers, which we know is always a very gray area. Then ILO has conventions 97 and 143. 97 talks about conditions of work and social security, whereas 143 talks about irregular situations, clandestine migration, illegal migration, focuses on issue related to irregular migrant workers. Even 143 talks about equal treatment for migrant workers, even if it is clandestine or illegal. So they have these conventions. Remember, ILO talks about the labor part. So the Migration for Employment Convention number 97, and the same I think is 143 is also there. Consider the Declaration of Philadelphia. Labor is not a commodity, and that poverty anywhere constitutes a danger to prosperity everywhere, which is a very noble thing to say, because inevitably, unless there is poverty, it will be a danger to prosperity anywhere. It applies to countries, it applies to the world. So let's look at some of the issues and challenges. Migration is a gendered process and impacts women differently from men. We have all understood this. Gender stereotyping limits women's autonomy and decision-making, increasing vulnerabilities to systematic violation of their human rights. Yet neither a gender-based approach nor specific experience relating to migrant women are usually captured in migration law and policies. More often than not, there is a saying that a lot of laws are made by men who cannot understand what it needs, a gendered approach, the nuances of various genders. Collecting and analyzing sex disaggregated data is a critical step. As I said, data becomes very important for making any policy, programs and laws that address migration, unique impacts on women and girls. So for example, I was reading an article in Scroll today about this particular Manipur video, where they said that, when this video is coming out, you are looking at the humanizing point of, the the perversity or the thing about what was done to the women, but we are not talking about whether this will end the hostilities. Then yesterday in one particular talk show, the Delhi Commission of Women's chief was talking about, has anybody been able to counsel these women after what they have gone through? Is somebody talking about their mental health? There are so many issues which come into the picture. Doing so is a human right imperative. Remember, at the end of the day, any story, whether it be identity story, a belonging story, or any story, it's a human story, and humans come with the human rights. When done right, it would ensure safe migration, prevent labor and human rights violations, save lives, promote gender equality. And why are we talking about all these? Because then it contributes to the economy of individual nations, host nations, and to the economy of the world. Because inevitably, if host countries are not able to take care of this, then it in fact decreases economic prosperity, because these are economic individuals. They provide economic prosperity to that host country. So if I go into the unwomen.org, they have listed these issues under all these heads. So if you see, I have listed out the site also. It's interactive.unwomen.org. And if you click each one of these, you will see what are the issues. So there are various, they have segregated issues on gendered migration into all these things. So, for example, LGBTQ, TIQ migrants are a different category, because then they will not come in the binary category of male and females. Okay. Outbreak of COVID-19, we had seen in the last unit, restricted, made situation more precarious for migrant workers, especially women migrant workers. Indian female migrant face great barrier to post-COVID recovery than males. This was an article in eClinical Medicine, but this was more local. Oh no, Indian female migrants face great barriers to post-COVID. It's a November 2022 issue. IOM analytical snapshot face the highest unemployment rates. This is what we did in one of the earlier units. Immigrant women in Canada had been adversely affected. So I quickly go OECD observe immigrant women in Central and Asia. So across the world, the immigrants were the first to get affected. And women got more affected than the men. So many women, migrant workers got isolated or trapped with abusers in their workplace because of pandemic. Lack of proper information and sometimes financial conditions forces many women to choose the route of illegal migration. Proper information becomes important, and unless that information and in fact, this is one of the things I keep talking about in media. Unless you're going to give proper information, actionable information, people are not able to then comprehend. If your information is dense or it's very confusing, more often than not, people will take that information from somewhere else. Financial conditions, they also get caught in the hands of fake recruiting agents who take advantage of their illiteracy and poverty. Many people on visit visas, the illegality of the document and illegal channels expose many women to trafficking and slave trade. So in the lack of proper information, and then of course poverty becomes a great factor in all these. So I picked up this article from UNFPA, United Nations Population Fund, 5 reasons migration is a feminist issue. And these are the 5 reasons. Half the immigrants are women and girls, alone as heads of their households, face major risks, including sexual exploitation, trafficking, and violence. Migrant workers face double discrimination, women and as migrants do not stop getting pregnant when they are on the move. Women and girl migrants are more likely to face health problem both in transit and in destination. Coming back to that Manipur video, if one community needs to, if there is a conflict with another community, why are women picked up as soft targets? This has also to do with gender, because it almost is that the community is going after a particular gender of the other community to pass on a message. It's a and that is where typically in migration this becomes it becomes a double discrimination, and face major risk. Okay, let's sum up. Sorry. We discuss some significant factors that are associated with women's migration, discuss some of major occupations, understand vulnerability that is associated with professional women workers, national and international providers, associated with protection of women rights, some challenges that need to be tackled to protect women migrant workers. And there are some references, there are more references in your study material. But if you do a general Google search, you'll come across a whole lot of information. UN DESA, there's a whole lot of information. Has mapped skill set of women migrants who returned home during COVID. They are now running a bag manufacturing unit in Muzaffarpur. Okay, I was not aware of it. Thank you, Kangat. Let me just check up. Where did they come back from?
Dr. Abhay, they have mostly returned from Bombay and Surat.
Oh, that is internal migrants. Internal
Yes,
migrants.
internal. But
okay,
is that the state government could map this skill set, and I had visited that plant.
Okay.
Now I think there are some 3,000 women are employed in that bag manufacturing.
Okay. That's a
businessman. The businessman is from Gujarat, I think.
Okay, an interesting piece of information. Definitely. So definitely when data is available, then governments are able to create policies, create laws. Basically, see, at the end of the day, one needs to understand that each individual is a working economic unit. And if that's why it's called human resources, because it's a resource. And if you're not going to use that resource goes waste. So you need to have those data, then you have to map those skills. Similar with international migration, when migrants go to a particular host country, if the host country is not mapping them, or if they are not able to provide good working environment, then inevitably that resource is not of use to the host country. It does not work either for the host or for home. Okay, by the Swadesh portal, international returnee worker data collected by MEA during the COVID-19 times. That was, I think that data was more in terms of the COVID. Again, government is looking at a data economy where they are selling data, which is perfectly fine. Whether that data was actually acted upon in a particular way, I am not aware about. Swadesh?
Sir. Hello.
Tell me.
Yeah, sir. The many airports are there announced by their displays. Many arrivals they go through this portal. What are the skills you have in destination?
Okay. So did they do anything? Did they do anything of that data?
Oh, sir. Yeah, we are entered few migrant workers data in that portal, but they didn't receive any calls to.
They didn't. So unless that data collection is not acted upon, that data becomes redundant then. Meanwhile, things have changed. The persons might have remigrated outside. We do not know. Any other question? What happened to mine? Okay. My video automatically switches off. Any other question?
Yeah, sir. The government of India, they don't have rehabilitation and reintegration policies to these international returning migrant workers. We observed the
Correct.
we looking. Yeah, sir.
Correct.
In future.
See, for example, there needs to be some sort of a, white paper or some thought process as to, whether uh, what what is your basic design in terms of resources, in terms of are you looking at those returnees as a resource, or you are getting caught in the moment. So if you see, in fact, the mainstream media discussions itself is a great indicator as to what is the society prioritizing, or what is a set of people prioritizing in terms of what is important for the society. So there are so many issues that need to be talked about, we need to be discussed, but they don't seem to be discussed enough, because these are complex issues. Migration is an extremely complex issue. So unless you are talking, you are discussing, for example, that example that I gave about Germany, they were able to figure out that this is the kind of shortfall they are having. This is the kind of projection that will happen. How will they meet those shortfalls? Where will they get those people? Are there incentives? So for example, if today, I'll give you a very interesting example. If today India is looking at doing a major thrust on chip making, now, what is the kind of skill sets do we need? Who do we have those local skill sets in the country? Can we get those skill sets in the global south? Do we reach out to which countries and get people to migrate and say that you can get an Indian citizenship if you migrate out here to help us do this? But unless you are able to bring those out uh, and discuss it in a public forum, it will not work, because in the absence of information, if every information is guarded, or all data is guarded or not brought out in the public domain, fearing that it might have a consequence, then you lose out on the human resource. Swadesh?
Yeah, sir. I'm getting.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. In that case, we call it a day, and have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you whenever I next see you. And in case you want the presentation, you can, as I said, let me share my email ID again. Hang on. Let me meet in group chat. My email ID is 13@duck.com. You can send an email to me and I will share the PPTs with you. Anything else also you can write to me. Yeah. So have a nice weekend. I'll see you next, and enjoy. Bye-bye. Yes, 36 to 51. Well,